Welcome to Life Picks Relationships, helping you understand and enliven your marriage through the various perspectives and experiences of others who found a way to prioritize what's really important in life. From new love to those that have weathered the storms, let's get ready to take your relationships to the next level with your host, ST.
Hey Life Picksters, are you ready to understand your marriage even better today? Whether you had a traumatic experience or not, even though we all have some on a minor level, you will gain so much from this episode. I mean, I hope so. I try to bring value in every single episode to every single person, which, by the way, as you know, we're on for hitting 1 million downloads per episode by the end of 2025. Can you help us reach our goal? After you finish listening to this episode, if you like it, share with someone who will benefit from it, whether you know that they had a traumatic experience or you just think they would like knowing more about it, and help us reach our goal while they can go and have their extraordinary relationship that they want. Now, to speak about this topic, I brought someone who I thought would be best fit to speak about this topic. She, first of all, went through traumatic experiences herself, wrote a book called How to Heal from Trauma, written by someone who did, and is now an intuitive trauma release and self-empowerment coach. So she really has all those different aspects, and I am super excited to be speaking with her. You could connect with her at riseaboveyourstory.com or on Facebook, also Rise Above Your Story. I'll put all her links in the show notes. Don't forget to also connect with her on LinkedIn. And we can start this. Thank you so much, Sandra Cooze, for being here. I'm so excited to be speaking with you. You want to start by describing to us your worst dating story.
My worst dating story. Oh God, where do I start? Well, my worst dating story was a first date in my early 20s. We went to an Irish pub, had dinner, and there were women walking around with roses in their arms. And my date bought one for me, and I thought it was the sweetest thing until 5 minutes later, he took my hand and put it on his crotch. That date was over pretty quick.
Ouch, that is just so bad.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Okay, yeah. I'm glad it was over.
It didn't go anywhere after that.
Okay, so you want to take us and tell us about your past, what happened to you, and how you met the guy that you are married to today.
All right. Well, in case you're wondering about my accent, I'm German, grew up in Germany, and love means my husband brought me to Canada. My story is not for the faint-hearted. I was molested when I was 12, sexually harassed at 14. I was bullied in school from 16 to 17. I was sexually assaulted multiple times between the age of 19 and 25. Sexually arrested in a workplace when I was 21 and raped when I was 22.
Oh my God. Okay, I know a little bit of your background, and I was like, okay, it's going to be this type of thing. And I'm like trying to imagine what it's going to be. And then all of a sudden I hear all the details. I was like, 10x. That is crazy. Now, let's go back to the first time you were molested. How was that different? Like, did you deal with it then and compare to when it happened when you were 25?
Well, when I was 12, I had no idea what was going on. The backstory is that I was 12 and I loved horses, but we didn't have the means to buy a horse or pay for riding lessons. So my mom made it possible for me to take care of a pony. And I was super excited. I was over the moon. And it was the stable master who promised my mom he would take care of me and teach me the ropes and watch out that nothing happens. He was the one who molested me. Like a really nice old guy, could be my grandpa. Yeah.
So what signs would you tell for people that, like people out there who either themselves or for their kids to look out for in these people who look like just nice grandpas and really could do some crazy
things? The thing is, pedophiles have to be nice. to get close to us.
Exactly.
So there was no sign at all. I mean, I was playing this back in my mind, like, what could I have missed? Once I understood when I was older, like, what could I have missed? There was nothing, not one thing up to that very moment when he actually molested me that pointed towards he wasn't interested in doing that. So it's not about what we can help our kids do. It's more about preparing our kids, making sure our kids know the right and wrong ways of a touch, knowing that no matter what happens, talk to the parents. The parents should be the rock. I mean, I talked to my son when he was 4, age appropriately. I started it. Yeah, I didn't go into the birds and the bees, so age appropriately. And I know that if anything would happen to my son, I would know what to do, but I'm the survivor here. So my mother, even though she took me out of the situation because she believed me, she had no idea what to do.
So you told your mother right away?
Yes. When she came home, and I told, even though I was terrified because I thought I did something wrong, because we never talked about this. I was afraid to talk to my mom, and a friend of mine came over. I told him, and he said, you got to tell your parents. And I still had no idea what I was talking about. I was like, why? Because I didn't understand what happened. I just knew I didn't like it. And I thought it was my fault because it just felt wrong. And I thought I would get in trouble because I felt so wrong. So it must have been wrong. So I must have done something wrong. That's something we have to communicate to our children. A, it's never our fault. B, always tell your parents. C, your parents will take care of it. And I think what I've needed to hear is, I've got you. That sentence, what I tell all my parents that I work with, I've got you. That the kids know someone is taking over. They can relax now and they're safe. That's the most important thing. All those what ifs and thoughts can come later in a parent's mind. The very first seconds of that communication, when your child comes to you and tells you, Mom, this happened, focus on your child.
Now, you're focusing on the child, but now what do you do with your child afterwards? How are you going to go and make sure, like you said, your mom didn't know what to do. What did she do with you?
I didn't get a hug. I've got you. I got a, don't go there anymore. And then it was never talked about again. So now as an adult.
Then it made you feel even worse. Like, oh no, what's going on here? And you feel like almost like responsible for it.
No explanation, nothing. I know what was going on until it all came rushing back when I had sexual assault education in school. When I was 16, 4 years later, that's when it all came rushing back. And I was like, oh my God, this happened to me.
What did you think then? Like, before we get to what did you think then when you learned about what happened, what emotions did you have besides for feeling guilty that you did something wrong here? Was there like any effect actually in your life and how you related to other people after that?
I don't think in the very beginning, because I was suppressing everything.
Yeah.
But I think it was more like continuity of the things, like this and then that and then that. And with everything that happened, I more and more lost myself because it was just one thing after another. It was like it never ended.
So when you knew what actually happened at 16, how did that affect you then? You're like, hey, this happened to me. It's not like, oh, I just got ice cream, right? It's like all of a sudden, all these emotions are coming back. Did anything in your life change then?
It did. Well, first, it wasn't really so much emotions that came back. It was, I saw everything that happened vividly in my head. I remembered every touch. I remembered every breath from him, every kiss, everything he tried to do. I remembered it all. It was like it happened just yesterday. And I had to find a way to understand and process that. Because at 16, I understood what he was doing. And I didn't really talk to my parents about that. But I asked my mom why we never went to the police. And she said, well, I didn't want you to have to go to court and go through all of it again in front of all those people. And I was thinking about that as a teenager. And I thought, well, she is right. She wanted to protect me, but it was my body. it should have been me who had made the decision. She should have, asked me,
should we go and tell him? And I think also, besides for you, I'm sure there were other people that he was doing to this too.
Yes. He went to jail for molesting another child after me. He did go to jail. But yeah, no, I was thinking about it, and I knew I would have gone to the police, because one major thing I learned that day was, when I do something wrong, I get in trouble. When adults do something wrong, they don't. That's what I've learned that day.
So how did that lesson that went all the way deep into your subconscious and really framed afterwards every action you took, how did that change the way you viewed life and how you did things? And add to that question, at what point were you so-called an adult that way you won't get in trouble anymore? Did you ever think of that?
Well, yeah, really growing up and becoming the adult took half of my life. Because for the longest time, I was afraid. I didn't trust anyone. I saw danger lurking behind every corner. I mean, after all of this happened, everything, the whole 10 years, I made myself invisible. I gained weight that I'm still trying to lose. I stopped wearing makeup. I was wearing frumpy clothes just to make myself invisible so that men wouldn't notice me anymore. So it was really, all of this conditioned me to not trusting, to being afraid of life. And that I think took very long to heal. And the beginning was when I was molested as a child, because from an early age on, I was taught that men just want my body. That's really what I've learned. Whenever I tried to go on a date and look for love, they just molested me, sexually assaulted me, or who knows what. And I was like, seriously, what is it about men and me?
Did you have any friends, anyone you could trust, a teacher, or obviously your mother, you weren't so there was no one in your life? No one.
Whenever I reached out, I was always dismissed.
Why do you think the culture, the society we live in, obviously things changed from the time that you were a kid, but it still really has a really, really long way to go. Why does society view it like that? Who in their right mind would think that it's a 12-year-old kid's problem?
I don't think so much that it's a 12-year-old kid's problem. It's more what would the neighbors think? What would the neighbors think if they knew? We're talking Germany here. We're talking post-war, where you don't talk about issues. You don't want anyone to look at you funny. And knowing that this happened to your child, the neighbors could talk. And we live in a small town. Oh, it used to be small. But, so small town people talk. So this was more the issue. And
do you think that's what it still is? That's why people don't speak up, you think?
Well, let's put it this way. The first time I told my mom that I would turn my past into my business and openly talk about what happened and have interviews and stuff. And she was like, how does your husband think about that? And I was like, what do you mean? It's well, what if there's an interview of you in the newspaper and your neighbor reads it and asks you about it? What does your husband think? I was like, he supports me. What's the problem?
Wants me to do this.
Yes. So I told my mom, no, this is your own limiting beliefs. This is my story. I have every right to talk about it, and I can help people with that.
Exactly.
She has since turned around as one of my biggest supporters, I should add, but it took her a while to get used to that.
Afterwards, when you're successful and you do prove to her and you get stories back from people that tell you how you help them, then she's like, okay.
Yeah, so it's just a mindset shift. She was brought up the same way. My grandparents were brought up this way. So it's really a generational thing.
So do you think that over time it will get better?
Yes.
It really has to.
Yes. There is no other way. I'm thinking about the Me Too movement. What? Everybody's talking about it.
Yeah.
They come forward, talk about what happened to them. And this is so important. This is history in the making. Women are talking about what really happened to them. And that's the only way we can change things, if we know how many women are really affected by this. Think about 1 out of 4 girls is going to get molested before she's 16. And 1 out of 6 boys. And that's just the statistics from people we know. not the people who don't talk about it. This is scary.
Yeah.
We have to change it.
Agreed. Okay, so now going back to trust. If you didn't trust anyone, then how were you able to go and trust your husband?
Well, I like to see my husband a gift from the universe after all the sorry shit that I went through. It's quite funny, actually. Before I met my husband, I had a boyfriend I sabotaged every relationship I ever had, but it's beside the point. And he gave me a very big piece of the puzzle. When we broke up, he said, I've just been married to a woman with mental issues, and I really don't want to have another one in my life. He didn't say that mean. It was a fact. He stated a fact. And I'm so glad he did, because for the first time, I was looking at myself and I was looking at how I behave in relationships. And I realized that I was actually sabotaging it and how I really don't like the person I was. And I was like, okay, so before I enter a new relationship, I want to become a person that I like. 3 months later, I met my husband.
How long later?
3 months later.
Oh, wow. Okay. But that was a short time. How were you able to go and like,
something
sorry to cut you off, but did you get any help before this?
No. I reached out I did see a psychologist once about 2 years after I got raped. And after talking to him, I say him, for an hour, he said, well, I believe you already worked through it all. What am I supposed to do? Again, dismissed. No, I didn't receive any help.
So going back to your husband, you met your husband 3 months later. No, I need to hear at what point you went to get help, at what point you went to really process it. I want to know what was before or after, but we'll have to find that out. You met your husband 3 months later and...
Well, my uncle is American and he was stationed in the Air Force in Germany. So they moved back after he retired, and my aunt and uncle were just building a house in Michigan. And so my sister and I thought we would love to visit them, spend a few weeks in the States. I mean, you don't get much of a chance unless you have family there. So when we had planned a trip, I went on Yahoo on one of those clubs. Romantic Rendezvous was the one. And I just taped a message that I'm going to be in the States in the spring, and if anyone wants to show me the nightlife. Now, when I told my aunt, she lost it because she thought I could get a psycho, or who knows. So, okay, I got some very interesting messages that I didn't even bother to reply to. Yeah.
A little bit smarter at that point.
Yes, very much. And so, but my husband, he replied and he wrote, well, tell me when you're coming. If I'm here, I'll show you what you want to see. And if I'm not here, I will get someone for you to show you around. Oh, wow. And I thought, well, it was a little weird, but okay, there was no ulterior motive. It's like, all right, let's answer him back. I did answer him back. And we started emailing, we started talking on the phone. I remember the first time I called him was the first time we talked on the phone. And he had late shift that day. And I called him and I said, morning, sunshine. That was the first thing I ever said to my husband. Gosh. And well, about 4 months later, we met in person. And I just knew he was the one. It didn't take more than a day. And I just knew there was no one else that was right. People always say, when you meet the right one, you do. You just know. And the funny thing is, my husband once told me that day when he saw my message, he just went into that club because he was bored at work. And some guy said, hey, you should go online. Maybe you meet someone. And out of the thousands of clubs, he went into this one and only replied to my message.
Message from heaven.
Pretty much, yes. And we had a long distance relationship for 3.5 years.
For 9 years, you said?
3.5.
3.5, okay.
And then we got married and I moved here, and that's now almost 17 years ago.
Wow. Okay. Now, when you met your husband, first of all, were you the person that you wanted to be?
I was getting there. Now, the thing is with the right one and the wrong one, it's an energetic dance. Let's put it this way. Like when you have those relationships when you're younger and you bend yourself like a pretzel because you try to be exactly what you think your boyfriend wants you to be. that means the energy is actually clashing because you don't fit. And so you're trying so hard to be because your ego says, humor me. He could be the last one you ever meet, you know? So and then it doesn't work. But if you meet the right one, it's like a dance. There is no need to try and be someone you're not because you are with the right one who harmonizes with your energy, with your vibration, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And that's how it was with my husband.
Yeah. So when you met him, then you felt much more yourself.
Exactly. I could be exactly who I was for the first time
literally what
ever.
like more relationships does, brings out more of the goodness in you and helps you become you. Now, I want to hear more about how your trauma affected your marriage, and in the same time, how on a personal level and on a professional level, like how does it help? How was it just for you? And how do you see it also with other people that you work with?
Okay. Well, on a personal level, it was a journey. I mean, my husband didn't know much about my backstory. I mean, I told him, you know, on a side note, I was raped. So I didn't really talk about it. And
you dismissed it also.
Sorry?
You dismissed it also.
Yes, I did. But I noticed that when it came to intimacy, every once in a while, when my husband touched me, I felt disgusted and I was like, sorry, I can't right now. But I didn't put two and two together at this point because I was so good at suppressing my trauma.
It was only once in a while or was every time?
No, once in a while. Usually it was good, but every once in a while I got this feeling of, I want to throw up when he touches me. So my body was triggered.
Yeah.
So he must have touched me in a specific way that my rapist did or something, and that triggered something within me. But it went away. But simply because my husband never pushed. I said, nope, not tonight. He didn't. He left me alone. So he was very respectful with that. And this is so important because he respected my boundaries. And I know how, when you're really in the mood, how difficult it can sometimes be to really not. But
I think it's also harder. Did he know? Like, meaning if a couple discusses the trauma and they know it's a part of it, then it's like easier to say, okay, this was like a big part of her life and she had this trauma and it affected her in all these ways. So it's easier to respect. When here it was like, okay, I just don't want now. Like some couples would, like some people would just like push, like maybe, but after such a case, like, it's like, no, just like get out of here. And the fact that he didn't do that, even with that whole backstory, just like a little bit of knowledge is really impressive.
Yeah, I mean, I was so grateful, especially now when I think back after I healed it all.
Yeah.
I think back that he was always respectful of my boundaries and said, okay, even if it was like right in the middle and say, you're hurting me, he stops.
Yeah.
I mean, what guy can do that? Honestly, I mean, no offense.
So first things first is like respecting boundaries all the way for both sides, people.
Yes.
Whether you're the one that had the event or whether it happened to you, whatever it is, whether it was sexually or physically or even just anything that's triggering in any part of your life, you always want to go and respect those boundaries.
Exactly. And this had helped me a lot in my healing journey. Now, it took a few years until I realized that trauma healing is what I wanted to do. I didn't just wake up one day and say, hey, I want to heal people. I want to help people through trauma. No, I had to heal my trauma myself. And the more I healed, the more I realized how much I actually understood of the puzzle pieces of what really has to happen. Because when you go to therapy, counseling, you learn coping mechanisms.
Yes, yes.
But I go to the root and just get rid of the whole trauma, so nothing is left.
So first, how were you healed from the trauma? And then I want to hear how you heal others.
Well, it was a long journey. It took me 20 years, but I don't work 20 years with my clients. I should say that. No.
I'm sure you also didn't work with just one person for 20 years. There's a whole bunch of different programs, different people, different things.
Yeah, that's right.
Was there like a specific method or a specific thing that really, like you say, like this was the biggest help that there was?
The biggest help that I got was embracing everything that I was. So not just the physical, mental, emotional, but also the spiritual side. So I'm a very spiritual person, not religious, spiritual. I'm a Reiki master. I work with crystals, and doing this work, this has helped me so much in understanding triggers and understanding how we hold on to things, how trauma can cause physical pain. Take fibromyalgia, for example. It's a result of trauma, of unresolved trauma that is still stuck within us.
Yeah.
Same with MS. It's trauma.
I think most physical pain is from whether or not trauma or stress or just like an outside source that goes and comes into our body. So for sure, trauma has an effect. Now, how do you deal with clients? How do you just get rid of their trauma? It sounds like magic.
Well, I don't get rid of their trauma. They do.
What?
Because I don't get rid of their trauma. They do.
They get rid of the trauma.
Yes,
Okay.
I only guide them towards it. What I use is a modality called traumatic incident reduction, which is a modality designed specifically for trauma and PTSD. And it helps to release triggers. In a sense, it's similar to EMDR.
EMDR, okay.
But it's more like coaching because it's very structured and it's only asking questions, specific questions for specific incidences that help my clients look at their trauma and slowly, gradually release the triggers.
So what, obviously it depends on the situation, but like what type of questions might you ask?
They're always the same.
What are they? Some of them. Just curious.
Okay.
I'm curious. I'm like, what is this?
All right. So let me start from the beginning. So TIR is a session sequence of 3 different session types. The first one is exploring, where we choose one person's situation or place that triggers what I was traumatizing to my client. And then I just talk about that. And then the next session sequence is unblocking, where I have a series of 20 questions. Each question is asked repeatedly until nothing more comes up. Let's say, for example, if we talk about abusive father, I would say, okay, concerning father, is there anything that has been suppressed? And then my client thinks about that. And whatever pops into her mind or his mind, they talk about.
Now,
and then
what
I ask the question again.
They're too traumatized to talk about it?
Well, that's why it's gentle. It's slow because we don't go directly into the incident. That will take hours to release. But we do the prep work by first talking about the incident. They're already releasing triggers. Then by asking the questions, they release another set of triggers. And we continue with the questions for 5-6 sessions until we both are confident they are ready to go into the actual incident. And this is what I love about TIR. It's fast. You can release your trauma in 6 sessions.
So cool.
But it's
then
gentle.
What happens in the last set?
The last session, we go into the actual incidents and I really talk about what happened over and over and over and over and over again.
So basically like 15, every step of what happened in that way.
Yes.
Now, how's that different than the first session of just talking? Oh, the first session you said is talking about something related to it, not the actual event, right?
Yes, it's about everything surrounding that. So if it's about the father, we talk about the father. And then for the last session, we choose one incident that the client is releasing. So usually we take the most intense one and the others around just fall away, not important anymore. Because usually the most intense one that really triggers a person, that a person goes back to in their mind over and over again. And then the others generally fall away and we can look at the next subject.
Ooh.
I love that. Most of my clients feel better and lighter after only 2 sessions before we even have completely released the incident, just by releasing the triggers. And it's a beautiful work.
It's so amazing. Now, you went to someone who did this on you?
No.
So you only found out about this afterwards?
Yes, I was already on my journey for doing trauma healing, and I was studying coaching in Vancouver. And then I stumbled upon traumatic incident reduction. I thought, hey, that's cool. I was like, let's learn this. So I added this too. And yeah, I loved it. I love the theory. I love how it's so simple and to the point. I mean, I'm not a person who sugarcoats things.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm always direct and honest and tell people like it is. And my clients love that. I mean, you can't sugarcoat trauma.
No.
So I'm
Please don't.
I ask triggering questions because those are the best kind to bring people to think and release. So, and TIR is right up my alley because it goes directly to the source. We don't try and sugarcoat. We don't try and find coping mechanisms. No, we go to the trauma and rip it out.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that so much and let the person like live. So now going back to triggers, speaking of triggers, what other triggers come up? Like, could there be from a trauma in a marriage specifically?
Oh boy, too many to count. Well, the first trigger that really comes up in relationships is childhood.
Child what?
Childhood.
Childhood.
I was brought up differently than my husband. So, and then our opinions clash. Let's say I was still brought up with be a good wife, take care of your husband, be a good mom. And of course, I'm trying to break out of this paradigm with having my own business and being a mom and a wife. Especially with COVID, it was very interesting because my husband's working from home. My son has virtual school, and I'm suddenly a full-time working mom who was degraded to a housewife with a side hustle because I have to take care of my family all day. And I told my husband, this is not working. I can't be a mom and a wife all day long, cook dinner, cook food 3 times a day, and in the evening, take care of my business. I'm too exhausted. So, and these are things that can trigger us because for my husband, nothing changed. He goes to work, he works downstairs, and then he goes to his computer and plays. Me, I suddenly have breakfast, I have lunch, my son is hungry every hour. I have to clean up after everyone, make dinner, and I don't have those 6 hours and day that I usually would have if my husband went to work, and my son to school.
Right.
So now I was extremely triggered because I was doing five things at once, and I was overwheled. So
let's
in a
just explain to
relationship,
listeners, how is that a trigger in relation to the trauma that you had?
When I was still living with my trauma, I tried to please everyone. I tried to make everyone happy. I tried to do everything out of fear of not being good enough. So that only if I do everything will they see my value. Because I didn't feel valuable myself. I didn't feel like I was worth anything because I was always treated so badly. So I always made sure the house was clean. I always made sure dinner was on the table and everything to really make my husband happy. But now this was still going on the way it used to. And I was like, well, sorry, but I can do it all and run a business.
Yeah. So for listeners, it's not like the actual actions. It's more like the feelings that are coming out from what was happening,
right?
From how you're elated afterwards, from all the emotions that came up, and then how it found a place in your life. And now all of a sudden it was like pushed and it can't be in that place. And it reminds you back of what happened then.
Yes, it did. And really, this is what a trigger is. When we're being triggered, it's just like an emotional memory that comes back into our consciousness from something that already had happened. So when we're being triggered and we are arguing, we're starting to have a big fight. We think it's our partner who caused it, but it's not. The partner just caused the trigger, the memory to come up. And this is something that in a relationship you have to learn to work with. You can turn every argument into an empowering conversation. Once you see that someone is triggered, take a step back and say, okay, I see you're being triggered. What do you need? How can I help?
Do you think it's good to say the words, I see you're being triggered?
It depends. If both partners are aware of triggers, if they understand the concept of triggers, then yes, because it can snap them right out of their rage and say, okay, let me look at myself. What just happened? That's what I do with clients. Aside from TIR, I teach them how to work through triggers on each other, to be each other's coach in this moment. But no, you can also say, okay, you could also ask things like, okay, what just happened? I don't understand why you're being so angry. What are you feeling right now? How can I help?
Yeah.
What do you need?
Coming from like a really understanding point of view,
yes.
Supportive. instead of like going and attacking head on.
Exactly.
Now, what do you suggest to people, someone who went through a trauma, to like really sit down and think about all their triggers that might be, or just to like keep it running in their mind and seeing like, hey, this thing keeps on triggering?
I don't think it's really possible to really think about all the triggers that might be, because you don't know what
okay,
triggers
not
are coming
all,
up.
right? That is like, as I was saying that, I was like, you can't really think of all, because then this is going to happen, or like COVID's going to happen, right? Or something, and then it's going to be all. But like the general type of things that this always triggers. Like, I know this is a common thing that when you do this, then it.
Yeah. Well, if you know that something triggers you, yes, you can work through the trigger to the root issue and release it. And it's very simple, really. When you're being triggered, you have a negative emotion. First of all, we usually are angry at something, or we're resenting something. But anger and resentment is a mask for pain.
Right. I was about to say it's a secondary emotion. So
exactly. So we have to understand what we are really feeling. So then we go deeper. What am I really feeling right now? Give the feeling a name. Is it jealousy? Is it guilt? Is it feeling of abandonment, feeling of not being good enough? What is it? And then depending what feeling it is, go deeper. If it's guilt, is it shame? Is it jealousy? Those are, again, feelings of not being good enough, feelings of done something wrong. So where did I feel like this before? And then we go on a scavenger hunt through our mind. We try to remember, where did I feel this before? We look at it like a movie and follow where our mind leads you. And then we look at the incident, say, okay, I understand that I felt like this before. Then we say, when else did I feel like that? And then we go deeper until we go to the root cause. And we understand when it's the root cause because it's the most intense.
Yes.
And then we look at it.
Would you suggest couples do this like in the moment of an argument? Because it sounds like a real conversation with a lot more emotions that would be coming up.
What I would suggest is making a realization that something is going on that's not supposed to be there. Take a deep breath. Take a few minutes. And then sit down and talk about it. But not in a way, hey, you were triggered, so what's going on?
Yeah, no. That's going against the whole entire thing.
It will just cause everything again. When we're being triggered, the main thing is to be acknowledged, to be heard. Because I still have triggers come up out of the blue, even though I really worked on all of mine. There's always the odd one coming up. And I really sit down and process and try and figure out what it is. And so this takes time. And if we have a partner who can coach us through, then we're not alone. And the feeling of not being alone, that someone is there who is there for us, who understands us. This is so important. That's why I say, what do you need? How can I help? I'm here. I've got you. You're safe. Whatever the trigger is, if it's especially sexual assault or any form of that type of trauma, I've got you. You're safe. Let's figure this out. Like really encouraging, but giving your partner space to explore this in their mind. Just sit there and wait until your partner is ready to talk, because they're going over it in their minds and trying to figure it out. And when they're ready, they will talk. And this is so beautiful.
Yeah, totally. It's like all of a sudden you're not alone in this place anymore. Mm-hmm. And it's like, okay, I could breathe now. Like, this will be fine. Now, after that, once they tell their partner, like, okay, I'm here for you, I've got you, and they really go and they listen and they coach them through this, what else can they really do to go and support their partner?
Well, with the question, what do you need? Their partner will tell them if they just need alone time for a bit, if they need a hug, whatever they need, they will tell them. But the thing is listening. I mean, listening is coaching 101. Listening is so important because usually when we listen, we don't really listen. We listen to reply. We listen to talk about ourselves, our own experiences, or we listen to patronize. But we hardly ever listen just to listen. So this is something that couples need to practice. When they have a conversation, do they really listen? Or do they already work on the answer while the other one is still talking? Yes. So really listening is an art form. It can be learned. Sure. But if you really listen, you'll hear things that are not being said. And that's really listening. Really listen until your partner is done. and then reply. This is so important.
1000%. Whether you're trauma or not, then
Yes.
listening, I think, is something everyone could improve in. Now, on the flip side, someone who had the traumatic experience, what could they do to like help their partner to better their relationship, even with everything that they have?
Be honest. When we're in a relationship, it's like two people decide to spend their life together. But those two people, to have an amazing relationship, have to become true partners. And to do that, they have to be dead honest with everything. Ask the difficult questions. One thing that I always work through with my clients is don't assume you know what they like. Ask them. This is something I went through with my husband. I was always doing things I thought that he liked, made the foods that he liked, and he just ate them to make me happy. And then one day he said, well, I don't really like this. Could you make this and this and this? And I was triggered because I felt like a bad wife. Instead of just asking the partner, okay, what is it that you really like? What makes you happy? And not being triggered when it's something you didn't expect. Right, just accepting the honesty. And when there's something you don't like, talk about it. Be honest about it, because unless you tell your partner, how would they know?
Exactly.
Be honest. Honesty is the most important thing in a relationship.
Yeah, it's what makes trust be able to happen. So let's say, just going back to that example of you cooking something that he doesn't like. And so he's being honest eventually, and he's telling you that he doesn't like this thing, and then it triggers you. Just to give a little bit of a role play for people so they could actually go and try this at home. Now, I don't know at what point of your relationship this was and how it actually played out, but if this were to happen with someone you are working with today, how could the husband in this situation ask the right questions to help you with your trigger?
Okay. Well, he could start by asking, well, why is this upsetting you so much? Or he could say, well, he could start with, I'm really sorry that I upset you right now. What just happened? Really
question. Okay. Sorry to interrupt on this, but as the husband who's being honest, right? It's nobody's fault that he doesn't like this and this triggers you. We just have to make that really clear that you're taking responsibility for what you're doing, but don't take the guilt that you went and you triggered your partner.
This is not about that. This is about
you're not going to get anywhere.
Acknowledging that something just happened that neither of them saw coming. I mean, a trigger you don't see coming, it just rushes back to the surface, and you have, in that moment, no control over your emotions. You just lash out.
Yeah.
That's unfortunately how it is. But if you understand if your partner, as a partner, you understand what a trigger is, you say, okay, what just happened? You think what just happened.
Yeah.
You say, okay, all right. So, okay. I'm sorry that that just triggered you. What happened? So he's not taking on guilt, but he's acknowledging that something happened.
Yeah.
So just not to excuse, but to say, I understand. Okay, sorry, I just triggered you. What happened?
Yeah.
And then the first answer usually is, I don't know. I have no idea what just happened.
That just came out of nowhere. Like, it wasn't me, it was someone else.
Yes. So, and then really give the partner time to think about, like, what actually did just happen. I just felt really demeaned. I just felt really low. I just felt like I can't do anything right. Okay. Where's this coming from? Like, it's not so much about what you ask, but how you ask. Like, not being annoyed because you just been bluffed off, but really say, okay, something just happened. Let's fix this.
Do you find that you have less arguments than most couples because of this so-called way of dealing with things?
Yes. Well, our relationship has definitely greatly improved.
Because I really think that most fights, they're either because we don't understand another person, as in, like, we think we're talking about one thing and they're talking about another thing, or it's something like this. There's a real deep either trauma or wiring or belief that they have like underneath, and it just like triggered something in that way. And that's where the fight comes in, because there also would just be a discussion. It won't be such an emotionally charged situation.
Exactly.
So yeah, I really like that. I like that so much.
Well, there's like, when it comes to triggers, there's like 3 main reasons. One is our upbringing, our belief system. That's being triggered. Like, we're supposed to be this perfect wife and we try everything to be perfect and it's not good enough. This is one thing that can trigger us because we're just not good enough because we're brought up this way. Then trauma can be a trigger, and not being heard is a trigger.
You want to explain that one to us?
Yes. Basically, it comes back to listening. When I'm trying to convey a message to my husband, and he half listens, or he has no interest in what I'm saying, or he says the exact same thing, only words are completely different, but says no to whatever I say. Things like this. So, yeah, the feeling of not being heard. When I try to bring a point across, my husband doesn't care.
Yeah. Because
he's busy or who knows what.
And I think that is something for so many people. It's like, just as a human being, you just want to be respected. You just want to be heard. You just want to feel understood. And you want to be able to go and do that for your partners. So practice that listening.
Yeah. Exactly. And then there's always this paradigm of men versus women, how men are brought up and how the family dynamic was in their family, how their father treated their mother. And they
or in cases like you, like the culture also.
Yes, exactly. When I think about here, people were brought up more free, free spirits and do what you want. And in Germany, after the war, no, you have to respect everybody, respect your elders, be respectful to a fault. Yes, I couldn't be disrespectful even if I wanted to. It's so drilled into me. And this is difficult because I was brought up in a defeated nation, if you think about that.
Yeah.
And Canada, they wave their flags everywhere like the States. And when we do that, people look at us frowning. Still to this day. I remember I went to visit some of my husband's family once, and they were singing a song, and it was like one of those victory songs from Canada. And they asked me, do you have victory songs? And my husband was like, no, she was on the other side. I was like, gee, thanks.
And you guys made peace.
Yes, we did. We made peace.
Okay, so now before I get to our final question that I ask everyone, what is the one thing you really want life Pixers to take away?
There is so much struggle in the world. A relationship should be a sanctuary. The relationship should be the one part in your life you can feel safe and never have to worry about. But it takes work. So
I was like, as you're saying that, I was like, never have to worry about it. You have to feel safe. You need that. And it affects everything, but you shouldn't have to worry about it. But I was like, but it's work. I was like waiting for you to say it. I was like hoping, or else I would have to add it in.
Honest communication is key.
Which brings me to my last question. How would you describe an extraordinary relationship without using love, connection, and for you, I'm going to put in honesty and trust? Make it hard.
Oh boy. That's the hardest question I've ever been asked, I think.
Oh, wow. I actually feel good about that.
You should.
Mandala right behind you represents that balance. So now I know why you made it.
Prosperity mandala. Prosperity in every aspect of life.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Sandra. This was so much fun. And I really appreciate you being here talking with us today.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it. Thanks so much for having me.
That's all for this episode of Life Picks Relationships, and we have a huge favor to ask of you that will not only support this show, but also give others what they need to take their marriage to the next level. We're striving to have 1 million downloads per episode by December 31st, 2025, so please share it with your family and friends so they can turn their relationship into an extraordinary one.